My text was about dialects and language. Now I will be talking to you about this throughout this screencast. First of all, language or dialect? Well, there is a lot of discussion for this question, and there is still no universally accepted answer for this question. Does that mean there's no difference? Well, not at all. Some people actually think that when a language is derived from another language, that makes the derived language a dialect. That would mean that Latin is a main language, French, Italian, and Spanish would be the dialects of language of Latin. But that is not true, because nowadays we call French, Italian, and Spanish languages as well. Why? Because language is constantly evolving and it has no clear borders. Well, is it an army, a navy, and a nation? No, it has clear borders. They are constantly blurring and they are mixing with each other. Basically, language or dialect, it is a very subjective concept. Something more about dialects though. Dialects here are more regional variant of language. If you travel from north to south or from south to north, you will see and hear constant changes. For example, if you go from south to north, you will notice that good night changes into good need. History. A little bit of history, of course. Received pronunciation is actually the Queen's English, and it is very posh back in that time. Even was it very posh, and it was only spoken by royalty and upperclassmen, and it was a social disadvantage because people would love to hear where you're from, and what better way to hear it than to hear your accent. If I hear a Geordie accent, then I know where that person is from. If I hear a purely London accent, then I know that this person is from London. The printing press really helped us out here with dialects, accents, which one to use. William Caxton helped us in 1476 to announce received pronunciation as the officially used in writing, specifically here in the printing press writing. Why? Because he thought this was the language royalty used, and it was most popular in the south as well, so he used this language. In the 19th century, public boarding schools also encouraged their students to actually start using this received pronunciation, which is nowadays posh English. BBC, they are known, very well known, over the globe. But here's the beginning of BBC. It is actually a British Broadcasting Corporation. And what is the best accent do BBC think? Educated received pronunciation. And why? Of course, royalty spoke it, so it had to be more educated. Today, it is posh English. During World War II, BBC played tricks on the Nazis, and that is a well-known fact, as they actually hired a Yorkshire announcer because they thought the Nazis wouldn't recognize the regional accent. This Yorkshire announcer did manage to make some people angry, especially people in the south, by saying, and to all in the north, good need. Now, social classes and accents. We will be talking about the U and the non-U here. The upper class the U standing for upper class and the non-U standing for the middle class, but not the lower class or the working class. Here are some expressions, some differences which linguist Professor Alan Ross noticed. Do you have a bath versus do you take a bath? Table napkin versus serviette. Lavatory paper versus toilet paper. These are some things that he noticed and which he actually wrote in an article. This article was later published in a Finnish academic journal. And Nancy Mitford, a fellow U class, well upper class, she noticed this article and started writing about this. And she started to add some expressions and words he had used to the ones he had used. And this became a glossary for the upper class. Following the article were, of course, poems, more articles, and even manuals on how to be more posh. But the upper class still claimed that they would know when someone tried to be an upper class when they originally weren't an upper class. Now, about this class system, boundaries started blurring, and when boundaries started blurring, especially the languages, or accents or dialects, they started blurring as well. They started becoming more like one. British posh people started using normal expressions, expressions the middle class would also use, and also the middle class people would start using expressions the upper class people would use. For example, nowadays our English is mixed, but the most posh person, which we would think we know, is the Queen. But is she really that posh? Even her accent changed. Even her accent actually went through changes and is also becoming more and more like a Radio 4 announcer. Well, accents change all the time. We can't blame her. It really depends on place and time and person even. Now, the U people use standard received pronunciation, but the non-U's, what did they use? Well, they used estuary English. It was not posh and it was not working class English, but it was something in between there. Now, posh people would say, "Am I bothered?" While the estuary English would say, "Am I bothered?" Well, here you can see that these accents also change. Now, in the 21st century, there was a boom industry of call centers, and more than 1 million Britons actually worked in those call centers. And in those companies, they thought that regional accents were absolute gold. Why? Isn't it more familiar and isn't it just nicer to speak to someone who actually understands you perfectly well and who you can understand perfectly well? Well, using their own accents really made people prouder of their accents and happier. They also had other people who understood them better, and it's just more familiar. Now, in the 21st century, there was indeed a change, because this made it more personal for these people. It was now introduced at work as well as at home. So here you can see those boundaries also melting together. And even the celebs help. Celebrities like Ant and Dec, who use their Geordie accent everywhere and anywhere to present. When do you use received pronunciation? Nowadays, actually, we use it better when we are talking to higher ups. And it is not anymore like before when speaking in posh would get you further in life. Honestly, that's not the case anymore. Nowadays, speak to your family, speak to your friends, speak to your colleagues in normal, your casual language, your casual dialect. Only when you speak to someone who is higher up, like your boss, you will use posh English. Or of course, royalty. Royalty also uses posh English nowadays. Now, everyone, good news.